Okay, there are two types of things that we calculate margin of error for. We have the proportion, so like people vote on something and what percentage of people actually would vote on this. So this is the kind of thing that you often do for like elections. What is the true percentage of people that would vote for this person, kind of thing. And we also have margin of error for a mean, an average. This is the one that you will be using for your project because all of you have a mean, but you don't know if that's the true mean. For example, the average shoe size or the average number of hours people work a week. You don't know what the true average is. So you will calculate a 95% confidence interval using this equation for what is the true average. We're going to do both though, just so you get some experience with both, and then I'll have you do this one for your project at the end. So let's start by practicing sample proportion. Here's our equation where P is the sample proportion and N is the sample size. So let's do an actual example with this right here for example number 1. So it says for each of these, it wants us to find these 4 things. So number 1, or I should say A, the sample proportion. So that is what out of what, like how many times did we get that thing? So if I want to do the probability of a spinner landing on a 2. So it landed on a 2 4 out of how many times? So let's add these all up. We have 6 here, 6, 5, and 9. So we add all those up and we get 30. So we spun a 2 4 out of 30 times, which is 0.1333 repeating. That is my sample proportion. That's how many times I got a 2 from when I did my sample. B, let's calculate the margin of error. So let's rewrite the equation down. It was P1 minus P over N. So my P is my sample proportion. That's what I got from A. My N is how many times I spun this little spinner. So I spun it 30 times, so my N is 30. So let's plug those in. So we get 0.13333, 1 minus 0.13333, all over my 30 times that I spun it. Just type that into your calculator and you're going to get 0.124. So that is my margin of error. But that doesn't really mean a whole lot until I create a confidence interval from it. So to take my confidence interval, I take my sample proportion, and I'm going to add and subtract my margin of error. And it's going to make an interval. So when I take this and add that, I get 0.2573, and I take that and I subtract that and I get 0.0093. So this is saying that the true likelihood of spinning a 2 on this spinner should be between this interval. And we can actually see if that's right, because the true chances of spinning a 2 are going to be 1 out of 5. So the true chances of spinning a 2 is 1/5 or 0.2. Is that true proportion in our confidence interval? Yes. And that is D. Determine if the theoretical proportion, that 0.2, would be in the confidence interval I found. Yes, it is inside that number, that interval. So this time it worked. My true proportion, 0.2, does lie in the interval that I made. Awesome. I'm going to have you try number 2. Do the same 4 steps, A, B, C, D, but this time you're going to do for landing on a 3. So this time we're going to use 6 out of 30. So pause the video, try to do all 4 steps for spinning a 3, and then we'll come back and check to see how you did. Let's see how you did. 6 out of 30 is a 0.2. That's our sample proportion. So we plug in 0.2 for our sample proportion. 30 times is how many times we spun it. Plug all that in to get 0.146. That's our margin of error. To get my confidence interval, I take my sample proportion and add and subtract my margin of error to get my interval. Spinning a 3 is a 1 out of 5 chance, so 0.2. And yes, 0.2 is in my confidence interval. Sweet. Let's try one more time, just in case you didn't get the last one totally right. Make sure you're ready for your homework. So this time, it's the probability of landing on a 5. So we come back up here. A 5 is 9 out of 30. So start with that, fill in the rest of it, and then come back to see how you did. Let's see how you did this time. 9 out of 30 is 0.3. So I plug it into my equation with my n of 30 to get 0.167. Take my sample proportion, add and subtract my margin of error. There's my confidence interval. The true chance of spinning a 5 on that spinner is 1 out of 5 or 0.2. And yes, once again, my true proportion is inside my confidence interval. So that is it for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about the other kind of margin of error, which is the one that you will use on your project.